just to officially introduce here, it's January 18th, 2024. And I'm Phil Mackey here with Chuck and Sandy Brands. And I can't remember when we hit the record button here. We've had some great off mic conversations, but I would love to start with how you two met. Do you remember the first time you met? You're both nodding. Sure. Your first date.
First time I've probably seen you around. The first time you caught my eye was I was in the main area at the high school, and it was high school that we met. And I saw you going across probably the English block, and you had something that looked like tie-dyed. It was red and orange, and just could see you so well. I thought, oh,
not sure that's good.
And so I don't think we met.
We didn't meet then. We met in Mrs. Johnson's English class. He sat behind me, and he had long hair. He had knee-high moccasins, and his vocabulary was like a couple words higher than mine. So I was in lust immediately, and I was making a film. So I asked him if he wanted to.
High school project.
I could make you a star, baby.
Wow.
I know, right? Who could resist?
So we filmed it. It was pretty funny. It was a really bad film. I learned what not to do, but that's how we met. And it was.
She had the script.
We were together for on and off for 3 years.
Yeah.
Finally broke up.
Yeah.
And then 7 years later, we got back together.
And so this timeline would be
73,
73. Yeah.
So 70. So you're kind of on and off. You're meeting in school in the early 70s,
right?
And then you're kind of on and off. But then you wind up getting married in 1983. So when and why did the relationship finally stick and lead to marriage?
I had actually got out of high school, and we broke up soon after. But we both graduated in February, early, a semester early. And I was kind of at loose ends. I think I went and worked for a company my brother-in-law was working for. And, it was downtown. It was by downtown LA, near Bandini Fertilizer. And if it wasn't the wind blowing from Bandini Fertilizer, it was blowing from the other direction, and it was just kind of a gnarly job, and got tired of it, decided to go back to school, went up to Santa Maria, where my sister and brother-in-law, 2 or all 3 nephews lived anyway. And so lived there, went to school, did some other things. There's another tangent there in 76. Tell that story.
Go ahead.
Let's hear it.
But I ended up getting my own place. And anyway, but in 76, I had the chance to go on a art history tour of Mexico. And I'd been to Mexico as an exchange student when I was in 7th grade. Sister city, Zacatecas, Mexico, and Zacatecas State. Anyway, that was back in 68. So anyway, went up there, decided to go on the trip. Then my brother was hijacked to Entebbe. He was on that plane.
Wow.
Brother and sister-in-law.
Weird.
They were married. They'd been touring around Europe, and they'd been to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or both. Back to Africa, they had their passports stolen. So when they got hijacked, the hijackers were looking for Jews. Basically, that's how that was going. And since they had to get new passports, they didn't have the Israel stamps on them.
Yeah. So
they were the 100. I think my brother tells it better, obviously, but the 100th and 101st people released before they kept the rest, and the rest got rescued by the raid at Entebbe. There's a couple movies out on it, and my brother will point out, I kind of remember who that guy's playing, and, the captain was really good. It was an Air France thing.
And he said he saw Idi Amin.
They saw Idi Amin with
the same uniform.
Yeah,
Idi Amin with one of his kids in full uniform. The guy was...
So that kind of started our history, because you went to Mexico, and you got your visa.
I had to decide whether I should keep I should go or I should, what's going on? So anyway, we ended up in Guadalajara first, and I think it was July 4th, the morning of, we went down and there were papers saying, rescue at Entebbe and, et cetera, et cetera. But I had been in touch, and they said, I think I knew that Jay had been released, but maybe not, since, it wasn't like cell phones and stuff. You didn't really just call somebody up at that point, 76.
His wife was the Jewish person. And
she was Jewish.
She looked East Indian.
Yeah.
So he thought Brands was a Jewish name, and that's why they were going to keep him.
Yeah.
So he really had to fight.
So he was able to talk him out of that.
I was going to ask, were you two? So you were not together?
No.
And actually, to continue, I ended up meeting my sister's across the street neighbor's youngest sister.
Hold on, sisters. Let's do
yeah, there were 3 sisters. The oldest lived across from my older sister, and so she would come up. She lived actually in Fullerton in Southern California, but she would come up, and I met her, and we got together and ended up married for 4.5 years till 80 something, 81 or 2. And then I heard through my sister, my sister and brother-in-law had ties with real good friends of hers, all from the same.
We knew what each other was doing for 7 years.
You were keeping tabs on each other.
Yeah. I had kept having dreams about him, and it was really kind of freaking me out. And I came home from this baby shower, and I said, Chuck's getting a divorce. And my mom said, well, I knew you were never over him. Well, but when she met him, she thought it was my girlfriend, Shelley.
When I walked in one time, she was kind of napping on the couch, and she looked up at me coming in behind her with the long hair, blonde, tall enough to be Shelley. Shelley was pretty tall. Oh, hi, Shelley. I'm like,
yeah, do I point out that's wrong?
Is she awake? Should I worry? Yeah.
Wait, what kind of dreams were you having about him?
It was about the cabin, which is where we made the film.
Yeah.
I actually dreamt what it was looking like at that point instead of what it was looking like when we went up, where the whole front room was opened up.
Yeah.
So I was just having these dreams about seeing him, and I don't know, it was just really kind of frustrating. A friend of mine said, well, you turn around and you say, go away. And I did, and that stopped the dreams for a while.
Sort of.
But I came back from the baby shower, said that to my mom, and I sat there for 4 days playing these stupid yes or no games about whether I should call him. And while I was sitting there, he called me.
Yeah.
So.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
And how long had it been since you had a conversation then?
Oh,
7 years.
Yeah.
7 years. So 7 years, and you're thinking about, should I call, should I not? And he's obviously thinking the same thing.
Yeah. And then we met. He told me he broke down. That's what happened. He's always late for everything. And he called me and he said, I'm broken down off of the 134, which is the Ventura Freeway. Yeah. It's North Hollywood. And he told me how to get off. Well, there was no exit there. So I had to go up, come down the
exit coming south and not going north.
Wasn't looking for me. So I kind of got a whole time walking across the street and everything to see him. Then we ended up in a gay bar. Didn't
know. It was just like a restaurant lounge, We went in and I happened to notice the 2 guys sitting down the bar from us were talking about their relationship, and it was like, okay. Well.
They were more interested in you than her, and you figured out your surroundings.
I'm sure, yeah. So that was 82.
Yeah, that was.
And then we got engaged, or we announced we were getting married at Thanksgiving. Got married in March.
83, yep.
And I got pregnant immediately. It was kind of nice. So we had Kate in November. So we didn't really have a first year of marriage until the next year.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, after he lost his visa in Mexico, in 1970, we were told we have to alert the media when we travel. Because in 1979, I was standing outside of Parliament when the bomb went off. They killed the Shadow Secretary of Ireland. You could see the smoke come up and everything. 1980, I was in New York when John Lennon was killed. And then we were in L.A. visiting family in '84 when OJ did his stuff on the freeway. I mean, we were down there.
Yeah, we just come in and
so a gravitational toward historical events.
Right.
So to avoid that, instead of vacationing, we just moved. So we moved from LA to St. Louis. St. Louis, we went to Colorado and came back, and then Montana.
Colorado was when I was in radio. Back to
we were really getting used to the
St.
cold.
Louis.
Yeah. And then we went to upstate New York, and my brother was having health issues, so we went to Georgia. I'm allergic to Georgia. And then we came back here because we have granddaughters, and I have to spoil them and ruin my daughter's life.
Yeah, well, you kind of went through the timeline of places you've lived and
pretty quick. Yeah,
and I'd love for you to sort of pick out a couple of for you guys as a couple. We talked about Mexico for Chuck, but what are some of the favorite places is there a place or two that you say, yes, that was a staple in our lives as a couple?
Well, there was an interesting, he used to like to drive down dirt roads, and we were up in Big Bear.
This is when we were dating, not later, but.
And he went down a dirt road. It was really kind of fun and nice, except for it suddenly ended and the dirt was loose. Couldn't back up. It was a ski slope. We had to drive down the ski slope.
Yeah. And we ended up kind of on the brow of a hill and looking, down at a 35.
I remember
40
that real well.
Holy cow.
Hill and went down, but I did see that they had the rope grid on the hillside that they put down to hold everything and then hold it for snow when it comes.
It wasn't meant for a truck to be driving down.
In a Dusty, a Valiant.
Plymouth Valiant.
Like a 73.
1967.
A what?
1967.
Oh, wow.
It was a great little car. After it was my dad's. I bought it for my dad for $140. Sorry about that. Yeah. And then my brother bought it from me for $100. And the first thing he did was he drove into a telephone pole. And he said he was going at 5 miles an hour, and somebody asked him how fast the pole was going.
Oh.
But they kept driving it out to the desert and rolling it and kept driving back.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty amazing little car.
Yeah, the desert was the place to go, and if you didn't have a dune buggy or something,
you roll your sister's car.
Yeah. Drive a Valiant.
How did you mentioned you were in New York for the John Lennon assassination. How did you wind up in New York?
She's a writer.
Yeah, I was working at Scripps College in Claremont, and it was the summer, and so nothing was going on. There weren't any teachers. There wasn't anybody there. So I wrote a novel, and it took about 3 weeks, and I wrote this really garbage novel, and I thought, I want to rewrite that. So I rewrote it right away. And didn't use much more than the names from the first draft. So by the time I got done, it was 4 drafts, and I sent it in to a literary agency, and they accepted it, and then but told me what I had to do to rewrite. So I rewrote it, sent it back, and they put it out to publishers' auctions. So it was purchased by Pocket Books. So I actually had a novel published. It was kind of funny. So I went to New York to pick it up, and I really liked New York, so I wanted to live there. So I decided to move there. It's expensive, and you have to have an apartment. So I was there for about 3 months before I finally gave up trying to find an apartment. And that was the period that John Lennon was shot. So, and we went to the memorial service in Strawberry Fields. So he wasn't with me. We weren't together at that point.
This is a year or two maybe before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I wrote another novel and just had to dump it. So then I started working on this great novel about California history and the British attempt to take it, things like that. We called it Gone with the Santanas or Wuthering Hacienda. It didn't do well.
But you're a fictional writer.
Yeah, but I also nonfiction too. Feature.
Yeah, can we go down a side street of just your writing and your media career and hit some of the things that you're most.
A lot of it was until I got my master's degree. A lot of it was, you did the secretary and kind of hoped you'd get a break. So I did some freelancing and some editing, and then the novel. I did work for Hearst Newspapers when I first got out, but it was in the advertising department. And the woman that designed Hearst Castle designed the lobby of the Hearst building in LA. And so you'd walk in with these gargoyles staring at you.
Yeah.
And there were only like 4 windows in the building. They were on the 4th floor. So anyway, so after I got my master's, I was freelancing in St. Louis when the kids were little, finished my master's. And at the end of it, I was freelancing, writing news feature stories for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, which was kind of cool.
Yeah. And
then got the job teaching writing in Kalispell. Okay. And it turns out that I'm not the best teacher.
Oh, no.
Patience, and it's so easy to write.
Yeah. And that's what they used to say. Ted Williams, the baseball player, became a manager after his career, and he was terrible at it because he always wondered, why can't you hit a baseball like Ted Williams, can?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
How come you missed the signal? How come? Yeah.
I write novels. Why can't you write novels? Yeah.
Yeah. And you keep telling people not to be afraid of writing and write like you talk. Don't use those big. It was really funny because the editor of the Post-Dispatch called me one night, and after you cover government for a while, you're using those big words without even thinking about it. So he called me in the evening. He said, Sandy, at the Post-Dispatch, we don't utilize anything. We just use it.
Utilize versus use.
Yeah.
How often would you say utilize in your own dialogue?
Exactly. So that was pretty fun. So then after I did that for a while, I was still trying to write, but every time I'd sit down at the computer to write, the kids would just go cuckoo. And then when they went to school, he came home. He started delivering papers at night.
Oh, well, that was when I was between. Yeah.
And then you went to Colorado. So then I had the kids by myself.
When I went into radio, I went out by myself. And they had a flea bag motel that they put me up in. And it's a long, convoluted story.
But it starts with you guys were married with your 2 kids.
Yeah.
And now it's a long distance marriage for how
15 hours.
That was about a 15-hour straight through drive from eastern Colorado to about 3
before
months.
I got hired to do the news.
Yeah, and then there was turnover at the station, like half of the people basically, and so I was given the morning shift from like 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning for an hour or 2. Plus, I'd come back after they were off air and fix equipment because I'd worked on electric forklifts for, 7, 8 years by that time and knew something about soldering and, all this old equipment. It was an old panel, with the push buttons and you could pop them out and see the wiring and all that old analog stuff. And cart machines,
The carts probably you had for remote broadcast, the Marty that you
at Marty.
The pole of the antenna on a pole, right?
Yep. We did one out a remote festival kind of thing out there that we all planned. Oh, it was odd. And then there was turnover at the station. And so they needed a couple of people and they needed a news director basically. So I kind of said, well, Sandy's, and I kind of sold her up, and sure enough, they hired her. So we rented our house, or let your mom.
And couldn't sell our house.
Not that quick, no.
And so we rented it out to a man whose kid and her boyfriend were living with them. And everything exploded at the end of the year, and so we ended up moving back to St. Louis, beaten out an ice storm on the way home.
It didn't.
My mom was living right there.
We rented a house in Fort Morgan, and both worked, at the station. And then they wanted me to go on commission only for sales, and that was it. And I said, no can do.
Yeah.
It was right before Christmas. And so we packed it all up again and went back to St. Louis.
My mom lived in St. Louis, just around the corner from where we had lived.
Yeah.
And so we stayed with her, and
while we waited.
The man had moved out, leaving the house to his daughter. So we had no info on boyfriend. And they were junkies. I think later we heard she had OD'd.
Well, we got a visit
from the
one
police.
time from the major case squad, St. Louis PD, and they said, we're looking for,
the guy was
Mr. So-and-so. I said, well, yeah, they rented here, but it's been, like a month and a half after they were gone. Okay, we're trying to find him because it was an armed robbery or something, major case. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they
didn't pay rent.
Well shut of them.
We had to go to court and get them kicked out. And
actually, we're there when the marshal came and said,
"That's right,
you got to get out."
And the woman sent her daughter,
giving them notice and all that. Anyway,
so this was the year that wouldn't quit because then we got audited and they said we couldn't claim some stuff, and then we had to pay that off.
Mileage. For
and what year are we in?
1990.
So early 90s.
90.
Yeah.
So you've got a couple of kids who are not quite
back.
10 years, maybe 8-10 years old.
Devin and Catherine. Kate would have been
7. Yeah.
And Devin 4.
Right.
86
and then
to 90. Yeah, he was 4 when we went to Fort Morgan.
And they were doing pretty well in St. Louis when we went back. We lived outside of the city.
Yeah.
And then I got offered a job in Kalispell. It was gorgeous there. They had brought me in for an interview, and it's right near Glacier. So we decided to move there. I kept singing "I Ride No Paint," playing that. It was boring the kids. So when that came to an end, we moved to Minnesota. He got offered a job in Minnesota and in Arkansas
and
Michigan.
Yeah.
And
Zealand.
I loved his job.
Zealand Holland.
I had a master's degree. I sent out hundreds of resumes. Yeah. He sent out 5 and got 5 jobs.
He's got triple your pay.
Exactly. I was going back to forklifts because it seemed to always be there, and it was.
Well, how did you get started in forklifts?
Well, after the divorce and after as we were getting married, how did I know? Oh, I know how.
He's next door neighbor.
Of course, with my first wife, we had bought a house in Pomona. They were next door neighbors. So we had played cards with them and stuff, and he always had the company van in his driveway and stuff, so I knew that's what he did. And after the divorce in another year or whatever, I kind of stayed in touch with him, I guess.
Yeah, he was your best man.
Well, he was at our wedding, but I don't remember in between. Anyway, so yeah, and I needed a job. I'd been through so many jobs between high school and then, but and mostly by choice, I would leave them because I just couldn't find anything that really seemed to work well. And he said, well, you can come in and interview. And sure enough, they hired me, and it was a great company all through, 30 plus years.
Wow.
Beyond. But they started you with a 2-week training time, and you'd go out with a guy, and it was, going out for customers and fixing their forklifts. They might have one, they might have, 50, and you'd do maintenance on them and do repairs. And as you came up, you handled more and more repairs and et cetera. Kind of learn as you go. So
anyway, that became what, 30 years for you of
30 plus in forklifts. I ended up at a grocery distribution warehouse, in New York before we moved, that had like 200 mobile units, forklifts, gas and mainly electric. Yeah. And
the job I had, I was the director of communications for a regional body of the United Methodist Church.
That's right.
And membership in mainline churches is declining terribly. So this conference had been shrinking. It was all of Vermont and upper eastern part of New York. There were 3 other conferences. One was Western New York, Central New York. Oh, there's 4. Yeah. Central, then Southern New York, and then the city itself. But they decided that they had to combine all the non-New York cities. They call the outside of New York Tony. The other New York.
Okay.
Everybody always thinks Manhattan when you say New York. And so they took all of those conferences and combined them, split off one of them to Pennsylvania, and Vermont went to New England. Oops. And I saw it jump. anyway, so my job ended, and I was sending my resume all over, and then I decided, I'm just going to go back to writing, forget it. And I started doing freelancing for a lot of the, what do they call it? The overreaching church, God, I can't remember. But anyway,
not the general
for like the mission body of the church and other places. So that was kind of.
You're dealing with the directors of camping outreach, and
I was doing interviews on Skype with people in Senegal.
Wow.
And Vietnam, and Vietnam is illegal, and not Skype, but Christian churches in China and other things like that. So that was kind of interesting. I did some in Russia. And what they were starting to use Skype is to have joint worship services between a congregation in Russia and a congregation in New York. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. And then what did you eventually worked at the Shakopee Press?
That was before I got the job at the United Methodist Church.
Okay.
So I worked there for 2 years. Before that, I worked at the
earlier than that.
Excelsior. Was it Excelsior? Yeah, I think that's right.
And the Star Tribune too, right?
No, I didn't write for the Star Tribune.
Okay.
It was the St. Louis paper.
But
the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Yep.
When I was doing the magazine for the United Methodist Church, which is why I was hired, and I never edited a magazine in my life. Never put one together. So I waited until the last possible moment. You know how that is? You wait until the last possible moment. You know the due date's coming. So you wait until 5 minutes before it's due and you start it. And, that's the only way you can do it. Just get out of your way.
That pressure brings out the most creative energy, I think.
I think just get out of your way.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do it so you're so panicked. But anyway, at one point, after seeing the magazine, this guy came in. And he was the assistant sports editor for the Pioneer Press, right before they won the Pulitzer for the story they broke about the university.
Yeah. So it's 98, 99.
Yeah. And his father had been a United Methodist pastor, but he had kind of left the church. But he was so interested again that he wanted to come write for us. And then he eventually became a pastor.
Yeah.
Left the Strib or the Post-Dispatch and whatever. He wrote the story on homosexuality in the church, and is there a straight answer? That was pretty fun. People got mad about it, and they hid it from their congregation and things like that.
Yeah.
This is a topic. So, the church is actually split over that.
Yeah.
So, fortunately, I wasn't there when that happened.
But it wasn't all that long after.
And then I worked for the paper in Covington, Georgia.
Yeah.
Which is where they film a lot of fun stuff, like they filmed the Dukes of Hazzard there.
Okay.
And the car coming off of the tower, that's the county seats building.
That's before CGI, too. That's a real stunt.
Yeah.
Right.
Vampire Diaries were filmed there.
Vampire Diaries is right there.
Yeah. There's a restaurant called the Mystic Grill.
So
I worked for them for about 2.5 years. And then, like I said, my brother was having health issues, and he actually passed away in 2022.
Yeah.
So we waited until we could get everything settled, and then we moved back here.
Yeah.
So we could be closer to the kids. So we've done a lot of moving.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your travels and the different interesting jobs, and so let's talk about your kids.
Oh yeah.
So we've got Devin and Kate, right?
Yep.
What do you remember about Devin and Kate when they were little? What struck you in their personalities early in their lives?
She had her nose in a book most of the time. And she often snapped at people if they interrupted. Devin was a Nintendo freak. And he and my mother would get in fights. I wouldn't let them play anymore together because they were just terrible.
I believe Devin and I are about the same age. I
think so.
Pretty sure we grew up on the same Nintendo games.
Yeah, Zelda, Mario Brothers. And he was playing. He was only like 3 or 4. I liked the TV. It was a great babysitter. But what was it? I told somebody I was, anyway, so Kate walked up behind him and smacked him in the back of the head. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I just love him so much." I said, "Come, let me love you." So that's what they were like, and Devin would get really angry and just lose it.
do anything. I remember him. Our house was on a corner, but then there was a long, just a unused, basically half a quarter of a street, and then gravel piles that they'd left during construction. And he would take his 3-wheeler up, what do they call it? Big wheel?
Big wheel.
And race down there barefoot or whatever.
Neighbors were coming up. Wow, it's pretty amazing.
Bare feet down, and he was what, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah. No, he was just like all boys too.
Crazy.
He would forget he had to go to the bathroom, and he'd come running in, pulling his pants down as he raced through the house.
So we do have a chip missing in our male brains. Right. Time to go to the bathroom now.
At least one, yeah.
So he was born in 1986, and it was interesting. He was born in St. Louis, so he and I are both from St. Louis.
Okay.
Kate was born in the same hospital he was born in.
Yeah,
and my brother,
Southern California, and we left a year during that year.
Right. One of my best friends was the pediatric nurse, and Kate had been a cesarean. And I guess when a cesarean baby is born, they don't have the pressure to squeeze the amniotic fluid out of their lungs, so they have to manually do it. And she comes in, she says, Shelley said, it's really scary when you see your friend's kid like that. I said, I really didn't want to know this stuff.
Yeah, imagine.
So,
what were some of your favorite just family traditions?
Blazing Saddles, Princess Bride,
our little
Young Frankenstein. The kids could recite. Well, they knew how to sing the Australian philosopher's song, and there's a English folk song called Two Magicians, and it's about a man who keeps trying to get this woman, and she changes herself into something, and he changes himself into something that catches her.
Kind of a chess game.
So the chorus line is, "You never shall have my maidenhead." So I had this 4-year-old girl going around singing about her maidenhead, and I said, "It's maidenhood."
Yeah.
But we watched Blazing Saddles. I remember sitting at the table one night, and Kate looked at me and goes, "We didn't get a harump from that guy." When we were in Colorado, there was a little hill. You had gone to interview the Secretary of Agriculture.
Yeah, Earl Butz.
Yeah,
he was a Colorado man, and somehow got pulled into an interview.
We were standing outside in Fort Collins, and Devin went rolling down the hill, going, "As you wish." He was 3. We were watching too much TV. He loved Sleeping Beauty.
Classic movies, because that was when TCM came out. And you could get just about
and I would make Katie's friends watch these old movies,
Yeah, Mr. Blanding.
Mr. Blanding from 39 and Some Like It Hot. Oh. And they would get so annoyed with me because it was a black and white film. I'm like, don't be stupid. These are great films. So anyway, they
What are each of your 3 favorite movies? I'm putting you on the spot with that question, but I bet you're going to have some good answers.
Well, I think Princess Bride is right up there.
Yeah.
Casablanca, I love.
I love Field of Dreams.
Oh,
that's a great movie. Yeah.
You're a baseball fan?
Yeah. Going back to when I was a kid, my dad got one summer was able to take us to 3 Dodgers games at Chavez Ravine, Dodger Stadium. And, those are the days. It was 66.
Oh, yeah.
Koufax,
Drysdale,
Phil Regan, picking up the fireman's spot. And we saw Koufax pitch all 3 of those games. I think he went 27-6 that year, and we saw 3 losses.
Oh, you saw 3 losses.
He lost all 3, and one was like a 2-hitter 1-0 game.
Yeah,
but to see him pitch, it was just unreal. And one was against the Pirates. Anyway, I got to see Roberto Clemente cover right field, make a catch, and zip a throw to home.
Wow.
From like the corner and on the fly.
He could go warning track to third base, basically, right?
Yeah. The one that was fun to watch.
Billy Stargell, saw him hit.
The We Are Family, was that a little bit? That was in the 70s, I want to say.
That was later.
Okay.
Boy,
when we were in St. Louis, of course, with Cardinals. Yeah. And St. Louis is known as a great baseball town.
Sure.
And Ozzie Smith was playing at that time. It was always fun to watch him bounce around like a kangaroo.
Yeah.
Now, was he there when we went with your mom to the one game against the Yankees?
That was the Twins.
Oh, St. Louis and the Twins. I'm sorry.
It was so funny when we first moved to
get you.
Yeah, no, you're forgiven with how many different you've got. I'd love to see a map of. All right, this is.
I would too. We should do that.
Lines and years and dates.
We don't want to be found, but we first moved to upstate New York, and playoff games was the Cardinals, the Twins, the Dodgers, the Yankees, and the Red Sox.
Yeah,
and you were going.
Somebody else too.
I don't know who to vote for.
Yeah,
I don't know who to vote for.
Right.
It's a panic. So I think that was the year the Red Sox won.
It could have been.
Oh, was it the year? So where they won their first World Series in 86 years?
Yeah,
we moved up to New York in 05. It might have been 06 when they won it.
They won it in 04 for the first time. And then they won like 3 more.
Yeah.
The Red Sox went from never winning one for 9 decades to being a dynasty for 10 years.
Right. Yeah. There was that Moneyball movie. Right?
Yep. Well, Moneyball was about the Oakland A's.
Yeah.
Was it?
In 2001.
Oh, he went.
He got a job offer at the end in real life to go to the Red Sox, Billy Beane, and then he turned it down.
Okay. Well, that's where I get confused.
Yeah.
I'm not a baseball fan. I'm not any sport fan.
Yeah, surely not.
No.
But I never saw any other live games. Of course, I was a Rams fan when they had the fearsome foursome, and Vikings were the purple people eaters. So you had those two defenses going up against each other. And I played Pop Warner for 2 years, and I loved defense and all like that. So that's kind of where I started. I had older siblings, so got to play, baseball with my older brother and his older friends. So that was always interesting, fun. You had to be on your toes.
Yeah.
We saw the Who at Busch Stadium. And the people we were with, the guy was going, "I'm standing where Ozzie Smith does." He was more excited about that than he was about the Who.
Yeah, where Ozzie Smith does his backflips at shortstop. I'm gonna bring up. This is courtesy of Devin here. Sure. Sneaky Devin has thrown in a few fun things here.
Okay,
so I'm gonna bring some things up, and I'd love to hear a story from these, and we can go through as many as we can. Okay.
Yeah.
When I say Aunt Mary Lou and the Hatchet, what story?
Oh God, okay.
Yes.
This is
I wasn't
Aunt Mary Lou is my older sister.
You weren't there either, but they were telling this story at Thanksgiving. It was the first time his mother had heard it, and I watched her just drain color. So tell the story.
Well, my dad had bought a hatchet. He was real into camping and had been a Boy Scout leader back in Chicago when he was like 17 and 18, back in the Depression, basically.
Okay.
And so he had bought a new hatchet, and it was, of course, razor sharp and brand new. Somehow my sister got a hold of it.
Your dad showed it to them and said, "Now, don't you touch this."
Yeah.
Of course, that's like,
well, that's the first thing you're going to want to do.
Elephant in the room now.
Don't do that.
So she got it and made up a game for my other sister, Bonnie.
Was younger than Mary Lou.
And it was, I'll squat down here and swing the hatchet around in a circle, and you jump over it.
Oh, that sounds like a great game.
Somehow she did, Bonnie bet
a couple times, and then it got her.
And so I guess it wasn't spurting blood, so she gathered up some sod and some grass and stuff, and I think they were like 5 and 3, 6 and 4. And packed it.
They thought
it all came out later.
Noticed.
I guess it didn't come out. I don't know how she got it fixed.
I don't know. Then there's
what
is the thing that you do with the bowls in Mexico that you had one of those?
Yeah,
stabbed your sister with it.
The marching band, which they were also, and I also was in for a year, would go down to a place called National City, which was a a very regional band competition. Very, very competitive. You get dings for any smudge. But it was near the border, National City, and they brought back some picks that the toreador would stick in the hump of the bull to get him enraged and charged and all that.
I'd be mad.
Not into bullfighting, but so I was chasing them around, and I was the youngest, and I chased them into their bedroom, and she had the picks under her bed that she'd brought back from like Tijuana, basically. And all of a sudden I'm standing there. I think I have them trapped, or I don't know where. I don't know what. It's been too long, but I do remember she jabbed out from underneath the bed with that pick, the bull pick. It had a little barbed,
wanted to get him mad.
Point on it. Got me in the calf, and I jumped up on the bed, and I said my first cuss word, I think, was I don't know if I can say it.
Go ahead.
I just said, "You ass," because I think it was the only thing I could remember. And my folks didn't cuss or anything, and so that was pretty brazen.
They were a lot meaner than.
Again, that one wasn't spurting blood or anything, so it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
It probably was 5 or 6, I guess.
Yeah.
So what else? What other lies did
let's keep going. Well, some of these are questions that. What was your favorite college class you shared with Grandma Betty?
Oh God, it was medieval literature. The professor was named Barry Sanders, and he had the deep dark beard and long hair, and he wore a vest. And I swear to God, I thought he was Merlin. I expected the owl to pop out of his beard, but he was really good. And so we had to learn Middle English. And of course, I never opened a book in the college the whole time. And my mom would be so, good about it. And she'd read it all. And then I'd read her paper and she'd get a B and I'd get an A. So anyway, that was the class. And he used to call us the Earl's Girls. My maiden name was Earls. And the only thing I remember from that is the Ul and the Nightingale and Sorguena and the Garnacanicta.
Which means?
And that's, what is that?
The Owl and the Nightingale, the Ul and the Nightingale, and Sir Gwena and the Green Knight is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight.
Okay.
We had one of the recommended books was The Once and Future King. So that's why, that's what I wrote about.
Yeah.
So one time he was lecturing, it was hysterical.
Oh, yeah.
And he leaned up against the door, but it wasn't quite shut. So he goes hurling out into the hallway. And then he comes back and he goes, "When we last heard from him," he said. So he was really good. And we enjoyed him very much.
Well, actually, I mean, another side street, I guess, just I'll take you down, before college. I'm just thinking the era that you both grew up in, the JFK assassination.
We were 8, yeah.
What, that's those moments like that happen when you're a kid.
It was interesting. One of the classes I had in college was something about, it was the sociology of movements, and it was studying the freedom riders and things like that. And one of the things you had to do was write your political memory, what your first political memories were. And my mother's was desegregating the pool in Clayton, Missouri. Mm-hmm. It's still a southern town in some ways. Mm-hmm. Mine was the assassination. And I remember standing out on the playground after we got kind of released, looking at the mountains, which are to the north, thinking, the Cossacks are going to come. Oh. So I had put that together enough to know the Russians the Cold War was, but I wouldn't have been able to explain it. Yeah. And I remember dreaming about Godzilla wiping out the whole town except for our house.
Yeah. And of course, there was duck and cover, all the nuclear.
You probably did drills in school, right?
Yeah.
Go on your desk.
Yeah. Civil Defense published a book about what to do in L.A. if the bomb is dropped.
Yeah.
Right.
Said, get in your car and drive out of town. Sure. And then if you don't have a car,
use public
transportation. Everybody's like being on there. Just bend over and kiss it.
Yeah.
So there was that. And then RFK and Martin Luther King, and then Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, and then I mean, by the time Jim Morrison died, we were like, "Oh, this isn't really happening, is it?" And then Kent State happened in 1970, and my parents had been Republicans. I think his parents and my parents were the only 4 people who voted for Goldwater, and so I was doing the whole conservative thing because that's what my parents did. And then Kent State happened, and my dad said, "If you'd been on that hill, you should have been shot too." And my mom told me later it was just because he was scared, but I know other people said that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that was it. I went radical, and I started working. I worked for a group called People's Lobby about a Clean Environment Act, and I had to learn about nuclear energy and all this other kind of stuff. And then McGovern, I worked for McGovern. So by the time I finished all of that, I knew enough about politics that I didn't want to go into journalism because they were not covering it objectively, really.
Yeah.
You know, and I know the goal is to be objective, but I don't think we can be objective, not so we can be fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, we decide what we cover too. You know?
It's probably harder now than it even was 40 or 50 years ago.
Yeah, and the fact that people don't really talk anymore, you know, they just yell at each other.
Yeah.
So, so I did that politically, and then walked away from it all because I was so disgusted because of Watergate.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I saw Carl Bernstein talking about Watergate and 25th anniversary. He said, "I don't know why people got so cynical. We proved the system worked." He's right, but everybody got so cynical.
Yeah.
So
politicians are like that, et cetera, quote unquote. Yeah.
When in 1992, when there was a big field of Democrats running, we were watching the debate, one of the first debates, and Clinton was there, and I finally said, I guess I'll support him because I think he's probably the only one that's got a chance to win. And my daughter goes, I'll support Bill Clinton too. And I said, why? And she said, I don't know. I said, no, you don't do it that way. You go figure out why you're going to support someone.
Yeah.
She was like 9. So,
but it's a good lesson. Yeah.
So she comes back about 2 or 3 days later, and she said, I've decided I'm supporting Jerry Brown. I said, so why? Because he's from California like me.
I thought you were going to say maybe I'm going to support Ross Perot because I like the drawings and the charts that he puts out.
Both of my kids turned out to be pretty liberal and good talkers about it, too. And in fact, Kate was volunteering to do the election, manning the election tables.
Yeah.
And that was even after it got dangerous. And the city liked her so much, they hired her. So she eventually went back to work after being home for, 8 years with the kids?
Yeah.
So she works for Brooklyn Center.
Yeah.
And she loves the work. So.
And your son's in the Navy?
He's in the Navy. He didn't go in until he was 25, and he went on a sub. And I'm like going, you are not my son.
I couldn't do it.
Your dad must have cheated on you.
Claustrophobic?
Yeah. Very. Yeah, we took a tour of when he was in Groton training of one of the subs. And it was like, man,
the Nautilus, I think.
3 stacked 3 high in the bunks, and you've got what did he say, 20 inches?
You take turns,
sleep, roll over, and they take turns. Obviously, they're in shifts, but I couldn't do it.
The last time he
took to it and got into sonar.
Well, the first time he was deployed, they were doing the exercise with the South Korean Navy, and I didn't hear about it until it was in the newspaper.
Was it?
This is really scary because that's right in your North Korea.
Yeah.
I said, Devin, don't do that anymore. And so they went out again, and they were out for 8 months. It was the longest.
It was,
anybody's really been deployed in years. And he said it was great. He'd go swimming in the Pacific. But every time they were supposed to go somewhere, like Tokyo or
it would
Sydney or whatever, somebody would screw up, and they couldn't go for liberty. So he didn't get to see any of the places he
finally saw Tokyo, I think.
Yeah, he went to Tokyo.
Yeah.
And then he ran into
he's not on South
and to see my cousin's son, who's also in the Navy, in Singapore, and they got together and they had a great time. So didn't really remember each other; they just knew they were around.
Yeah, they were cousins.
Mm-hmm.
So, here's another. Just back to you. You started mentioning just some of the bands and musicians from
Right.
From the 70s ish.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Page Fixed Your Shoe?
No. I met Jimmy Page at the Riot House off of Sunset. Not for long. My favorite was that same time I met Mick Ralphs from Badfinger.
Mm-hmm.
And he went over and I said hello and he said hi. And I said, what you been up to? And he said, we just finished recording our album in Japan. I said, is it good? No.
I said, no, that's not our best work.
AC/DC said, somebody said, oh, you only have 11 songs and they're all the same.
They're all the same.
No, we have 12.
We have 12. Yeah, you betcha.
Don't disrespect us like that. We have 12.
Yeah.
So, no, it was a friend of mine when I was 14 was Three Dog Night. And we went down to see them on Glen Campbell?
Oh.
No, on Lappin.
Oh,
okay.
And we were walking downstairs towards the dressing room, and my friend's shoe broke, and Richard Dawson fixed it. He was very sweet.
Okay.
Not Jimmy Page. No.
Okay, Richard Dawson.
Okay,
Devin, you got to get that story right for
yeah. That's why you don't let them tell your story.
Is it? Exactly. Let me ask you guys. I have a few just sort of final questions that could go any number of different directions here.
Okay, then.
Yeah. No, this is. I have enjoyed. I feel like now, even though we didn't know each other an hour ago, I feel like I fit in with your family, and
you should come over.
I've got some of the same qualities as your children. It sounds like.
Were you born in 86?
I was born in 85.
Okay, close.
Right in.
Yep. This is where you interview me for an hour now.
Yeah,
right. You know?
I think my son-in-law's that 85 February. They were stuck on one astrology sign. He's a Pisces. His daughter's a Pisces. His other daughter's a Pisces. And my daughter was going, I'm being outnumbered.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So if you could relive one moment together, what would it be?
Oh, gosh.
Maybe you have different answers. Maybe you have the same answer. I'm going to take away birth of children.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because mine came out of that. It's not really reliving it. It was after Kate was born, and I was struggling, because it was major surgery. And I was too embarrassed to call the nurse in to help me, so he had to help me. And I thought, oh my God, if he's willing to do this, he must love me.
If he's accepting me in this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
The things you do.
I don't know if I want to relive it.
One that I'd just pull out of the air is right after Kate was born, we were still in California, and we took a ride up Mount Baldy.
Oh, yeah. That was fun.
To a little restaurant called Top of the Notch, I think they call it. And Baldy kind of had a notch at that point, and it was probably about 8,500 feet there. But we had Kate between us, and it was just a chair lift, not a gondola or anything.
She was, 8 months old? But you had her in that sack.
Oh, yeah. No, she was not in any danger, but I just remember her face being like, where, at 8 months old, just looking around.
And there was no snow, so there was no bad fall.
Yeah, it was either early, what it would have been. She was born in November, so it would have been spring probably, or summer. Yeah. Anyway, and we got up there and we had our hot chocolate and stuff. And
another thing I remember playing bridge the whole time I was pregnant and with Kate, and my dad had been a contract bridge player, so we sat out on the porch in California and we played bridge all the time. He would always forget to do it.
I would renege, and her dad would catch me on it.
Just loved doing
at
it.
least once a night, if not twice. Just, I'd pick up my cars before I bid or whatever, I don't even know anymore.
And that was just
it's been a while.
And then we were watching those old 1940s movies, the video movies before they were like Sunset, something or other with Benny Goodman or Tommy Dorsey or something like that.
Sunset Serenade.
That's it, yeah. And anyway. Glenn Miller's stuff and things like that. So, and I would lay down and he'd be rubbing my feet and I'd be out. And so,
or I would read
even after
sometimes.
Oh yeah.
And
Milagro Beanfield.
Milagro Beanfield War was one I read.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
And she would actually be out. So,
would you keep rubbing her feet even though she was sleeping?
I would for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after the kids were born, every time he sat on the couch, I'd put my feet in his lap.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
When Devin was old enough, he said, I am not going to get married. I am not going to rub my wife's feet. Well, his wife's a nurse, and she wants him to rub her feet all
day.
Yeah.
So, get those hands ready.
Yeah.
What is, I know that you guys, a lot of home cooked family meals.
Oh, yeah.
Give me one of your favorite recipes to cook and one of your favorite recipes of hers to eat. Two different answers.
Well, there's two. When we moved to New York, I asked Devin, what do you want for your last meal before we leave? Oh, yeah. Fried chicken or a white lasagna, which was his brother-in-law's recipe.
Right.
And it's like a chicken soup with cheese in it. It's so good.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all you want to eat. And he said, that's not fair. And I said, okay, so what do you want? And he said, I want fried chicken. I said, okay, let me show you how to make it. And I showed him how to make it so he could do it. And he actually is a very good cook.
Yeah.
So those are my two favorites. And roast beef. I mean.
Yeah. No. Hot roast. And your fried chicken is great.
Yes. I was told that was impossible because I wasn't from the South. I said I'm from Southern California.
Yeah. South Heat doesn't monopolize fried chicken.
No, you make a great from scratch mac and cheese.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
2,000 pounds of cheese.
Oh, I'm coming over. How do you feel the world has most changed in your lifetime?
The political situation,
for the better and the worst.
The worst is people are not kind to each other. They're believing the most unrealistic things. And people are, it's like, I'm telling you war is peace, and they're going around repeating it. And so I wonder what happened to critical thinking. I don't think it's taught anymore.
I think the internet is probably the biggest change that we aren't even able to grasp at this point.
That's true.
But I marvel at how much communication there is out there, and it's it can be good, it can be totally not good.
It's one of the things you have to teach is how to use the internet, because people go out and somebody was talking about the "I Had a Dream" speech, and in it, Martin Luther King said that colored. He didn't say black; he said colored. Mm-hmm. But somebody went through and changed it all to black. Well, that's kind of historic revisionism.
Yeah,
so you have to be careful. I tell people, go out to more than one site and look at this information. If it keeps repeating, you keep looking until you find something different.
Of anything you see, if you can find a couple of views. And
talking about going to primary sources and things like that. But yeah, it's the incivility that really angers me. I mean, during Watergate, even
in
the
Vietnam,
other side, Vietnam was awful. Ken Burns documentary. I'm a huge Ken Burns fan.
Yeah.
And watching it, and it was like I was so shocked because I was so anti-Vietnam. And there was a woman who said, "I regret calling them baby killers." And there was a great scene in the show Lou Grant where Animal, the photographer, kind of had a PSTD system.
It was a newspaper.
Yeah.
Lou Grant's show.
And Lou Grant couldn't understand why. And he said, did you fight in World War II? And he said, yeah. He said, well, that was a good war because you could explain why you were there. But we couldn't explain why we were in Vietnam. So,
very much.
But watching that, it was like going, boy, we were so hard on everybody. And I did not realize most of the troops felt that way.
Yeah.
So I talked Devin out of going into the Navy a couple of times. That was a peacenik.
But I think also, one of the better changes is the internet, because
and the phone.
Cell phone
communication with people that you love, and I think about even when you're talking about dating in the early 80s or the 70s,
right?
It was just a lot. You're thinking, I haven't talked to this person in 7 years. We've had no communication. Well, now you can at least follow people on Facebook or. Right. You can send them a little note under a picture, and you can at least maintain contact in an easier way, right?
Devin has had his phone number for 13 years. I still don't know it.
Right.
I can remember his phone number from high school.
I can remember my own phone number from high school, too.
But we called it. I've never really dialed his number, The only time I have to look at it is when somebody asks me for it. So.
Yeah. And the idea too of now, I mean, home phones are becoming extinct.
Yeah, so
landlines, right?
You know, for you, if you wanted to call her, somebody else might answer, and you'd have to ask for her, right?
Yep.
Well, actually, we're old enough. We remember party lines,
right?
And that didn't last too long.
No, yeah. But I remember my dad would tell us how to answer the phone. He was on the school board, and they were in organizations and stuff, and so he had to answer. Brand's residence. This is Chuck speaking. Every time it was a rule. Yeah. But
I like the way Dorothy Parker
changed how I did my job when I was out driving a van around from customer to customer. Because when I started, we didn't have cell phones. It was several years, I guess, before we actually even got flip phones and stuff.
Computerized.
So you'd have to find a phone, pull over if you had trouble, or if when you needed parts, you'd use the customer phone, get an outside line, hit 9, all that old stuff. So, I mean, and maps. I mean, I grew up with a Thomas Brothers, Metro map in the seat and on my lap.
We kept buying them even after we didn't need them. It took us a couple years to stop.
We could read them easier.
My dad never trusted those devices, the phone. He said you should have a hard copy map in your car.
No, I still
hard copies.
But I have. Well, just this morning, there's a split up here off 35W and 280, and it's telling me stay on 35W, 35W, and then you can go across and get 280 again.
Yeah, and
it says you got to get off 280. So I'm revving, I'm looking back, and I got over and got off at 280.
Yeah, okay.
It tells you that, but it doesn't tell you in time sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. You can't fully trust it.
Well, he's kind of a Luddite too.
Oh yeah.
So, and
I'm not the most digital savvy person.
My dad was a systems analyst, and so we kind of grew up with computers. Not that we used them, but when PCs were coming in, he was so excited about it, and then he passed away, so he missed it all. But I've had to learn how to use it for writing, and when I started, was you were doing a dot you were in the what do you call it? The background. But anyway, you were on the black screen typing a dot, command driven. So to do bold, you would do a dot, bold, and then you write your sentence.
Okay.
So you had to put all that stuff in.
Yeah.
And then Windows came out. Now there's a great essay by Umberto Eco. It was published in '95. If you have a chance to look at it, he writes about the new schism. He said the new schism isn't religion. It's between PC and Mac users.
Mm-hmm.
He said, PCs are Calvinist. You are responsible for your own salvation, which is publishing or printing your document. Whereas Mac is Catholic, all these sumptuous icons, and you don't know what's going on in the background.
Yeah.
And Windows is Episcopalian. It's kind of in between.
I love that. And it is still very much, 25, 30 years after that essay was written among people.
Mm-hmm.
My last question for you both is, what do you know now about living a happy and or successful life that you didn't know when you were 20 years old?
That it gets harder. I mean, there's so much going on and so much more. I mean, when you start losing your parents or your family members, that gets really rough. And when you become the older generation, that's very rough. I tell people I was pregnant in the womb, but they don't believe me. So anyway, I think that's part of it. I think forgetting that what made you happy was getting up and doing something, getting up and helping someone. You just sit around and kind of go, I'm unhappy. But, we're dealing with a lot more pain issues too. So.
Yeah, there's the physical stuff.
Uh-huh. But deal with. I think that's one of the things I learned.
I don't know. I guess I've learned that you actually need to ask for help, which I found out when I was a mechanic and technician and on the road and stuff. But even in life,
Did Devin tell you we almost divorced in Chicago on the loop?
No. Let's hear that one.
We were driving down to...
He doesn't like other people driving. We were driving down to Atlanta for the first time. He was sick, so he's in...
Yeah. I was sitting in the back.
He's the worst backseat driver.
Yeah.
And I got on the loop and I said, we can get out of this before we get downtown. What freeway do I take? And he's like, well, I can't read a map. I can't read this. And
I really couldn't decipher.
And finally he said, there, 94. Well, I was way over. I was right near the train tracks, and I just went, boom, right across.
Oh, no.
I went sideways practically.
Almost, yeah.
And he's like screaming at me, and the kids were asleep, and they were awake. And I said, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. And that was the last thing I said to him until we got to Atlanta.
Yeah, she pulled over, and I said,
oh, man.
You're driving.
And then he was explaining to his sister about how bad I was. They just got more and more quiet and said, Sandy was right.
Yeah. There's no getting around.
No.
Yeah. If you want to remain a loving, long-term, happy couple, designate a driver, designate roles, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. I just don't drive.
Yeah.
I used to like to drive.
Yeah. And now with maps, I mean, it's so much easier.
Yeah.
I used to always get lost. I always figured it was what you're supposed to do. So when I'd go out to do interviews.
It's fun to get lost.
Yeah.
I got to do a lot of great interviews like Bill Moyers and Paul Wellstone right before he died and all this other stuff. And I would go out for these interviews and I would get lost. I mean, they would describe something and it wouldn't look like what I thought it should look like. Yeah. So I'd be wandering around and, without cell phones, you couldn't call them. So you just sit there late and say, yeah, I'm pre-dip. So.
Oh, man. Well, this has been, an hour just kind of flies by when
it's way beyond telling, isn't it?
Telling stories
a bit.
Oh no,
no, we hit the post pretty well,
Good.
Okay.
But this is, it's been a pleasure getting to know both of you,
even though and
hearing your. I'll tell you some stories off microphone. It's not about me. This is about you guys, but.
Devin's been busy.
But thank you both.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
I didn't remember I was on air. I mean,
Yeah, we're actually live on the radio right now. We have to take a commercial break, and we'll be right back.
See you, Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Yep. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Thank you.